You may assert there's no waste in the Pentagon. You may assert there's no waste in
Stephen,
Treasury.
I'm not
you may
asserting,
assert there's no waste in HHS.
That, Stephen, I don't think anyone...
Then why are you not celebrating these cuts? If you agree there is waste, if you agree there is abuse, if you agree there is corruption, why are you not celebrating the cuts?
Stephen, let's calm down.
We're not
having a debate.
There's no reason
about whether there are places...
You are clearly trying to debate me, and I will be as excited as I want to.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America. Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. Every now and then, I like to do what I jokingly call a case study, looking at the interaction between politicos, between people in the media, and see not only what information we can glean about current events, but what we can learn about presentation, communication, tone, syntax, things like that, just to see how people communicate to the public and whether or not they're effectively doing so. In this particular case study, we're looking at Brianna Keilar from CNN and Stephen Miller, one of President Trump's policy advisors, and they're going to be talking about, of course, what everybody's been talking about in government lately, DOGE.
And what about the DOGE?
Oh, the DOGE.
Yeah.
More importantly about who's in charge in government, I want you guys to pay attention to who's in charge here in this interaction. We're going to look at the tactics used by both Ms. Keilar and Stephen Miller, but before we get to all that, I'm going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows, and if you like what you see and hear in this or any other video on the channel, smash that thumbs up button, like, comment, share the show with your friends, all that really, really good stuff, because all that's going to help this channel grow thanks to the YouTube algorithm.
It just needs to be fed. So feed it.
As always, gang, thank you so much for all that you do to help grow the channel. We're having a record month of growth here, and it's all because of you, so thank you so much for all your support, whether you're watching on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, maybe you're on Facebook or Instagram supporting the channel as well, supporting me as well. I appreciate all of those efforts. And for all you newbies out there who may have found the channel for the first time or found us recently, I hope this video earns your subscription as we talk about and examine this case study between Brianna Keilar and Stephen Miller, and we're going to focus on buffoonery, not just from one side or the other side, but probably from both sides here. Oh, and by the way, before we get to the clip, just want to remind everybody, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, me and my best bud, Ross Galloway, we're going back behind enemy lines. We're sure to be talking about DOGE and some recent federal court rulings that went in favor of the Trump administration. We're probably talking about some of the things happening in the People's Republic of New York City revolving around Mayor Eric Adams. Will he be removed by Kathy Hochul? There's a lot going on, and we'll be running down a lot of it. Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, behind enemy lines. Okay, we're done with the grift. Let's get to the clip.
Who is in charge of DOGE?
The President of the United States.
He's the administrator of DOGE?
No, the DOGE is what was formerly U.S. Digital Services. It's an agency of the federal government that reports into the Executive Office of the President, which reports to the President of the United States.
Okay.
The way that Article 2 works is a president wins an election, and then he appoints staff, including myself, including Mike Waltz, including Susie Wiles,
yes,
including Elon Musk, and those staff report to him.
Okay, well aware. So Elon Musk, a week ago, answered a question about transparency at DOGE. This is how he spoke about DOGE.
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the DOGE handle on X and to the DOGE website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent.
So you hear him there. We post our actions. All of our actions are maximally transparent. Does Elon Musk know he's not in charge of DOGE?
Now, things started out here pretty honest and forthright. Some direct questions from Brianna Keilar, some direct answers from Stephen Miller, trying to explain the structure of the executive and how Donald Trump can have his own staff in the White House and have agencies report to that staff in the White House. But then Brianna Keilar tried to change the mood and confront Stephen Miller over exact words. Now, if you're a parent out there, if you've dealt with little ones, you know you never want to hold people to their exact words. It gets really pedantic and really stupid really quickly. And Brianna Keilar doing this exact word attack here, I think it is an attack in my opinion, she's really setting herself up for a big fall, because a statement from Elon Musk talking about us and we are doing this, standing next to the president, knowing that Stephen Miller just said Elon Musk is part of the staff at the White House that reports to the president, kind of makes her look really stupid.
That was not my finest moment, I'll admit.
Again, the president runs the government, then the president appoints advisors, including Elon, including myself, including all the other staff here at the White House, and then those staff in turn execute the president's commands and directions to all the agencies of the federal government. This is how democracy works, something that we treasure in America. The whole American people go to the ballot box, they elect the president appoints staff, the staff then administer his orders and directives across the whole U.S. government.
Okay, Stephen, I get that, but this is important because we want to talk about who's making the decisions.
You're getting repetitive.
Well, we know who's making the decisions here based on this interview. Stephen Miller just said, the president. The president issues orders and directives and commands to his staff, and the staff executes. Executes. The executive executes.
Oh, wow, what a concept.
What is so confusing? What does Brianna Keilar need to verify and try to ascertain here? Seems like Stephen Miller has been pretty point blank and really clear. The president's in charge, but she's got to keep going apparently.
Employees, the National Nuclear Security Administration, you know about this. They were fired. The agency had to rescind those terminations because these were employees who were critical to maintaining the nation's nuclear stockpile. So then who is it making those decisions of which federal employees are terminated?
Well, in that case, the Secretary of Energy would be the one. So what you're describing with the cuts in the Department of Energy, those are directed by the Senate-confirmed Secretary of Energy.
Okay, so that was the Secretary of Energy's mistake.
Who said it was a mistake? It may have been a firing and a rehiring after doing an interview to see what people should remain that would answer to this administration as opposed to the previous one. It could be any number of things, but to just assume it was a mistake, it might have been. I'm not saying it wasn't, but to frame a question like that, it shows an assumed bias. It shows that there was a conclusion already drawn by Ms. Keilar here, and that is the framing she's offering to Stephen Miller. I'm guessing he's going to reject that framing.
Well, I wouldn't use the term mistake. I would say that it's pretty standard when you're downsizing government. You make cuts, you assess those cuts, you see who needs to be rehired, who needs to be kept, who needs to be
That's not what happened here, though, Stephen. You know that they were rescinded. These aren't normal things. These were terminations that were rescinded.
I understand that even a temporary interruption in federal employment is a great crisis and catastrophe for you and for CNN. What the American people see is a government that is finally delivering a promise of accountability under President Trump. You want to have a conversation about transparency? Let me ask you a question. Do you have any idea where the $22 billion that the Department of Health and Human Services provided to illegal aliens under Joe Biden is right now? $22 billion with a B. That's enough to provide a free house to every homeless veteran in America. Where's the $22 billion? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. Joe Biden just spent it, and now it's gone. Transparency begins with having an accounting of where every federal dollar is spent. And God bless President Trump for leading this effort.
Stephen.
Now, I'm going to push back a little bit on Stephen Miller here, because he is doing a little bit of spin on his own part here. He certainly rejected the premise of the question about whether or not the firing and subsequent rehiring of certain officials regarding our nuclear stockpile, whether that was a mistake or not. He pushed back on that. And Brianna also pushed back on that pushback. And it seemed like they had a disagreement on the characterization of those actions. And then Miller kind of got on his high horse a little bit talking about some whataboutisms with the Biden administration, which are all valid, by the way, if you want to investigate and find out where this is. And I guess Miller's overall point was that this is a process going forward. We are going to be assessing, we're going to be firing, we're going to be rehiring. This is all part of the process of transparency, which, by the way, has been lacking. But I want you to watch out for Miller getting on his high horse and getting very high-handed and high and mighty in this interview as it goes forward.
Okay, Stephen, so there are military members of the Guard and Reserve. They are protected by law from being fired from their day job while they're deployed. I have learned that at one agency, an employee who's actually currently deployed with the military has been notified they've been fired. Does your administration understand who actually makes up this workforce that they're dismantling?
Okay, so the question's a little convoluted here. I think what she's talking about is an employee of the federal government who is deployed with the Guard, with the National Guard, has been notified that they've been fired, and that probably violates federal law in doing so. And then she turns the question into a more open-ended question about the federal workforce in general. What's she trying to get at? Is she using like a micro example to talk about a macro issue? I don't think that's very effective in communicating a point or trying to glean information from Stephen Miller.
I'm sorry, I'm confused by your question. Is your question, does the president have the authority to fire a member of the U.S. military?
This is someone who is a federal employee and is currently deployed, who has government protection. As I'm sure you're aware,
there's
there are
a lot
laws
of
protecting that.
I don't know what laws you're referring to. I would love for you to be more specific. So far, you're not telling me the employee, the agency,
Uniformed Services
the deployment?
Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. It's well known by HR in the federal government and in private industry as well.
So, okay, so you're saying that the president, in your view, doesn't have the authority to recall a member of the armed forces who may or may not, again, I'm the first time hearing of this, that may or may not be serving overseas?
Don't know, I've gone cross-eyed.
Stephen, you understand how the Guard and Reserve work. They have a day job, and then when they're activated, they deploy. While they deploy,
right, but
that employment is protected by law.
Your question is lacking in so much detail. I promise you I'm trying to follow your question.
Yeah, let's get specific here. What agency? Where is the person deployed? Where is the proof that they were fired? It sounds anecdotal, and it sounds like that Brianna Keilar here is trying to make a larger point about some lack of awareness about members of the workforce being active service members or something like that. I mean, do you guys know what she's talking about? Let me know in the comments.
Are you asking me if the president has the authority to remove a member of the military who may be serving overseas? Is that your question?
My question was...
Okay, well, I don't know how much airtime you want to spend on this, but I'm not following your question.
Well, I think it's an important one.
Okay, now Stephen Miller's playing with his food. He's using Brianna Keilar's lack of clarity against her, talking about a clip that really this interaction has been going on for a little less than 2 minutes, saying that, you know, since you're not being so clear, this is really a waste of time here. And what are we doing? He's playing with his food a little bit, and it's a tiny bit arrogant. A little bit.
I guess I'll determine how much airtime I spend on it, but does your administration understand who is in the federal workforce?
Okay, now we've gone really off kilter. It started about a single employee that maybe shouldn't have been fired based upon federal law into a very broad question about awareness of who's in the federal workforce. This is not making sense. Maybe Stephen Miller should be playing with his food here a little bit, because it seems like Brianna Keilar doesn't even know where she's going at this point.
Yes, we have such a broad question. Of course, we understand who's in the federal workforce. And I'm happy to indulge all of these very histrionic questions about anyone who may or may not be fired.
That it's 30% veterans?
But I think that
Veterans are not active duty servicemen. So I don't know how we're bringing that up. Yeah, it just seems like a lack of preparedness here from Brianna Keilar. And again, the smugness of Stephen Miller shining through here. We talked about who's in charge of interactions. Well, look who's in charge here. Brianna Keilar gave up her authority as the interviewer by making poor questions and really going all over the place here, talking about the makeup of the federal workforce or this individual who was fired, or now talking about being made up of veterans who are not active service duty members, and just jumping from one to the next to the next, to the point where the point, whatever it may have been, is certainly lost. Feels like a bad Who's on First routine.
You have people who are deployed?
The U.S. government has $36 trillion in debt. The interest payments on the debt exceed the national defense budget. The American people are exhausted and tired of watching their tax dollars be corruptly spent, abused, wasted, and in every sense robbed and stolen from them.
Okay, I just want to go back to one point here. We're going to do a little replay. Look at Brianna Keilar's face right now and while Stephen Miller's answering the question.
The U.S. government has $36 trillion in debt. The interest payments on the debt exceed the national defense budget. The American people are exhausted and tired of watching their tax dollars be corruptly spent, abused, wasted, and in every sense robbed and stolen from them. This president, for the first time in history...
Did you catch the exasperation by Brianna Keilar there? That's because she knows that she's lost control of this segment of the interview. Stephen Miller gets to talk about whatever the hell he wants to right now because the questions coming from Brianna Keilar, not so great, not so good at all. Didn't really focus on any issue of concern. So Miller now gets to talk about his talking points as he sees fit. And the frustration and the exasperation here you're seeing from Keilar is an acknowledgement that she's not in charge at this very moment. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. With whatever point Brianna Keilar was trying to make earlier now lost to the sands of time, she brings back the focus of the interview with Stephen Miller to DOGE.
What did the DOGE do?
The DOGE do.
Yes, the DOGE do.
Well, the DOGE did what a DOGE does.
You have DOGE asking for access to the IRS systems. This includes the integrated data retrieval system. I know you've talked about this a little bit. Will DOGE employees be able to access individual taxpayer ID numbers and social security numbers?
No. But also, keep in mind, you keep
Will
talking
they be able
about
to
DOGE
access
employees.
taxpayer bank account information?
They will not be able to access anything that any other appropriately authorized federal employee could access. When you keep talking about, quote, DOGE employees, you're just talking about federal workers. You're just literally talking about federal workers. So your question will be, can federal workers do their job? The job of the federal workers at the IRS is to prevent... Well, I'm telling you that is actually what you are asking.
Again, the struggle for control here goes to Stephen Miller. Brianna Keilar got a direct answer to her question. Will these DOGE employees be accessing personal financial information of people? He said no. Take the win. Take the win, Brianna. You got your answer. She then tried to go a step further, which allowed Stephen Miller to say, look, all these DOGE employees, there's nothing special about them. They're federal employees. They'll have access to the things that federal employees have access to. What is so crazy here? This isn't rocket science. And again, Stephen Miller has used this as an opening to get back to his talking points about fighting fraud, abuse, inefficiency, and corruption. He's a master at gaining control, but I think he also has a tendency to turn a little smug, a little arrogant, and sometimes overplay his hand.
DOGE is part of the federal government. It is a term to describe the employees of the federal government who've been tasked with anti-fraud and anti-corruption activities. Again, you may not consider it a scandal, that millions of illegal aliens are accepting and receiving taxpayer benefits. You might not consider it a scandal that millions of illegal aliens have stolen Social Security numbers and are committing rampant theft of American resources.
You say that you're looking at widespread fraud in the IRS data, and you mentioned yesterday, and you mentioned again here, illegal immigrants who are getting child tax credits. Are you looking for that information in the IRS data?
Okay, a little non-specific about who's looking. Are IRS investigators looking for fraud? Are DOGE employees looking for fraud? Are they both looking for fraud? Is there anybody else looking for fraud? Who knows? Because you're not being specific enough here, Brianna. But let's see how it plays out.
Anytime a crime is committed, of course there should be an investigation. Is it your position that if somebody who is
Stephen,
here
are you looking
criminally
for that
is stealing
information in the
taxpayer
IRS
dollars,
data?
the federal government will find every illegal alien who is stealing American taxpayer dollars. And that is what Americans expect to happen. I don't even fathom the premise of your question.
It's a simple question. Will you find that information in the IRS data and share that with law enforcement?
If IRS investigators find illegal aliens stealing taxpayer money, of course they'll be referred to ICE.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
There is a little bit of a tape delay. I don't know if you just heard it just now between Brianna Keilar's question and Stephen Miller's answer, and that's causing them to talk over each other. That's a technological thing, and, you know, those things happen. That being said, Stephen Miller is becoming more emphatic, raising his voice, and maybe part because of that delay, but it's also his frustration with the repetition of Brianna Keilar's questions, and he's trying to retain and reassert his control and dominion over the conversation.
Of course it'll be referred to Homeland Security investigations. Of course it will be. Surely your position is not that we should let illegal aliens steal taxpayer dollars.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
And by the way, that's a tactic he seems to be resorting to now later on in the interview as his frustration is growing. Surely you don't think that A, B, C, and D, creating these straw man arguments that really no one has asserted, although some might say that it can be inferred from the tone of the questions, from the phrasing of the questions that we talked about earlier. And yeah, maybe he's frustrated by that. After all, he's on CNN, which is not a friendly network to the Trump administration. So while one can understand the frustration, he might want to tone it down a little bit.
Again, you want to talk about something to be upset about, that's it. What do you think? The millions of illegal aliens who've also stolen Social Security. Illegal aliens in mass have fake Social Security numbers. They have fake identities. Those are felonies. Why should there be an entire class in this country that is immunized from criminal prosecution and arrest for committing felonies? Felony theft of taxpayer information, felony theft of Social Security, felony theft of identity. These are all crimes. And yes, they will be investigated. Yes, they will be prosecuted. And yes, illegal aliens will be deported. And you know what happens when those deportations occur?
Just very quickly,
is that Americans will get jobs, Americans will get benefits, Americans will get houses.
Stephen, if they got a credit, a child tax credit, and they will be referred, you're saying, to ICE for that, and you would expect deported for that? Is that?
He just went on a tirade explaining that. Was Brianna Keilar not listening? I find that very hard to believe. I think this is now playing to her audience, which tends to be left-leaning on CNN, trying to be emphatic and maybe even fear-monger a little bit, and turn a real function of government, the rooting out of corruption and fraud, and also investigation into crime, and making that seem nefarious in some shape or form here. I think that's what she's trying to do here, and also trying to reassert, as we've been talking about throughout this video, her control over the situation.
Is that the position of the administration?
If it is found that a crime has been committed, they'll be referred. If it justifies a prosecution, they'll be prosecuted. If it justifies a deportation, they will be deported. This will be based on existing IRS protocols and procedures for criminal investigation and fraud.
All right,
the difference is that no one is given immunity anymore. No one is given permission to break the law anymore. Because this is not a country, this is not a sovereign territory, if illegal aliens can freely steal billions, with a B, billions of taxpayer dollars. And I would have to imagine that CNN, which is endlessly talked about the importance of democracy and the rule of law, would say that no class in this country should be above the law, least of all illegal aliens who've trespassed on our territory.
No, Stephen, I'm just asking, I wanted to get your position on some things. We're not taking a position here. We wanted to get some answers to some questions. There are so many questions that need to be answered.
It doesn't sound to me
Miller,
like you are, in fact,
you.
indifferent or unbiased on these questions, but thank you.
And there it is, folks. Basically, neither side is perfect here. I think we can agree on that. I think we can agree that Brianna Keilar, she lost control of the interview at many instances, and her questions weren't exactly the sharpest they could have been. In fact, in a lot of cases, the questions were complete shit. And she did her best to try to keep up with Stephen Miller, who, while he answered questions directly when he was able to understand them and they weren't, word salads a la Kamala Harris that was coming from CNN, he would then become overly emphatic and kind of not get out of bounds, but certainly overplay his hand. He'd raise his voice, he'd bring up a little more emotion, and he'd be overly emphatic with kind of killing the point.
Honestly, he's a bit of a dick.
And I think that both sides have room for improvement here, but I want mainly for us to glean things. Not only the information that Stephen Miller put out about DOGE, but how we can improve our own communications as well. Preparedness, having focus on points that you want to ask without going off on tangents, not overplaying your hand when you see that you're gaining an advantage in answering certain questions. I think there are lessons here that we can all take to heart and deal with in our own lives to better communicate ideas, maybe at the workplace, maybe in our personal lives, maybe in our friend circles, whatever the case may be. That's the point of taking on these case studies, is to not only expose the buffoonery, and certainly there's enough buffoonery here on both sides to talk about, but to also take lessons and not be the buffoon that we may be seeing on the screen here. So that's what I think about this interaction. There's a whole lot more to this. This was a much longer interview. We only took some snippets of it. So I'll make sure that I include the full interaction in the description for the video. And I really want to get to know what you guys think about these case studies, whether they're worth doing, and whether we can glean anything from it. Also, if you want to talk about who quote-unquote won, who quote-unquote lost, whatever the case may be, let's talk about it in the comments together. And as always, like and share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on this video and all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy. See you guys later tonight, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Behind Enemy Lines.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.